Welcome to the New Books Network.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Ferry. Welcome to another rebroadcast from the RTB archives.
From Brandeis University, welcome to Recall This Book, where we assemble scholars and writers from different disciplines to make sense of contemporary issues, problems, and events. I'm John Plotz, flying solo today, and my guest is the brilliant author and professor, Carlo Rotella of Boston College, author of at least 6 books that I know of. Is it 6? Is that right? Do I have that right?
I think so.
6. Okay, at least 6.
It depends how you count. I co-authored a couple.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, I didn't count those. Among them, the amazing, and Carl, this is how I came to know your work, Good with Their Hands, Boxers, Bluesmen, and Other Characters from the Rust Belt from 2002. And most recently, I haven't read this, but I'm really looking forward to it, The World is Always Coming to an End, Pulling Together and Apart in a Chicago Neighborhood. University of Chicago 2019, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Carlo, welcome.
Thank you.
So this is another installment in our fast-moving Books in Dark Times series, because the dark moves quickly, so we try to move quickly too, which, as you probably know by now, explicitly takes its inspiration from Hannah Arendt's Men in Dark Times, which proposes that, quote, even in the darkest of times, we have the right to expect some illumination, and such illumination may well come less from theories and concepts than from the uncertain, flickering, and often weak light that some men and women in their lives and their works will kindle under almost all circumstances and shed over the time span that was given them on earth. So, okay, at a moment like this, we really want to know what brings people like you, Carlo, and also like you, dear listener, comfort or joy. So draw up a chair and listen, and then maybe consider sending us your own thoughts about the books you're reading by Twitter or email or any other way you'd like to reach us. So, Carl, the only preparation I gave you was just to send you a couple of questions, which were more or less along the lines of, what are you reading that gives you comfort these days? What are you reading that gives you joy? And so can we just start there?
Sure. The first thing to say is the idea is we're all supposed to have all this time to read, but I, for one, haven't. Those of us learning to teach online have had a taste of what like the post-industrial job market actually looks like, which is you're on your email 27 hours a day and figuring stuff out. And so I've been reading a little. I've been listening a lot. Books because I've been out running every day. You can still run. So
for now.
Yeah, right. So although I saw the California rules explicitly allow running. Right?
Oh, really?
So I've been listening a lot, and I was thinking about your question and sort of where my instincts take me times like this, and in a couple directions. One is I noticed that I like to read old things, like the Germania of Tacitus and Icelandic sagas.
Oh, wow.
One of the reasons I think that it's comforting in a way is that, a lot of bad stuff has happened to a lot of people for a really long time.
Yeah.
And it used to be worse in many ways. So I find myself going back to that stuff in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
And just not so much seeking out the travails of people in the past, but rather just reminding myself that, like cockroaches, we've been around for a long time.
We take a licking and we keep on ticking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Germania in particular I really like, because Tacitus is just kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. And it's like, well, I think this is what's going on in this place that you don't really go to very much. Right?
Okay, so Carlo, because I would love to talk about Icelandic sagas because I have read them and love them, but I've never read the Germania. So can you give a lapidary account of? It's
just a kind of a quick survey of this place that Romans didn't know much about, but we're fascinated by because they had enemies there and allies to some extent, and it's just a kind of a poetic survey. What's going on the other side of those rivers, right?
Oh wow! So it's not a war. It's not an expedition.
No, it's like this is what these people are like. Yeah. Here's how they roll. Here's how they wear their hair. Things like that, right?
So it has Herodotus behind it, not Thucydides.
Exactly. So it's much more like this is what we know. But the Icelandic sagas are great for all kinds of reasons too, in that way. So that's one thing, is that I find myself reading old things and just reminders of sort of what life was like in another time.
Yep.
The other thing, and this is just like my pure comfort thing, and this has been true since I was a teenager, which is at times like this, I find myself reading P.G. Wodehouse.
Oh my God, yeah.
and the and there you go. There's yours. Right? And
let the record show that John has a giant PG Woodhouse by his bed. Yeah.
And I think the reason for that is not only the sort of harmlessness of the world in which he operates, but also is that actually I think when I look for comfort and joy, I actually look for voice, not plot. I don't really care about plot. What I'm interested in is voice. So I want to read, Charles Portis or the fantasy and science fiction writer Jack Vance. What I want to hear is voice, literary voice. And I'm utterly uninterested in plot. So actually watching movies, everybody's supposed to be like sitting on their couch watching movies and TV shows. It really doesn't work for me because it's like I don't want to see people with guns running back and forth.
Right. Wait, that's interesting. So do you feel like movies don't have a voice? Because the filmmakers I really like I just taught It Happened One Night last night, and I thought, oh yeah, this absolutely has a voice,
Yeah.
Just
so
right,
I agree with that, and I think it's not so much directors as it is genres, right? So I would want to watch a swashbuckler or noir or a musical, but what I don't want is like the so-called golden age of cable TV, it's sort of supposedly this golden age of TV we're having, which is like a lot of people with guns running around, which I'm not so interested in. And I guess the last thing I'll just say as like a general thing is what I'm not interested in.
Yeah.
What I have no craving for is critique. I have no craving for like astute takes on what's wrong. You didn't get that at the office.
Yeah.
And I guess I just feel like the newspaper's around for that, and so a lot of people say at a moment like this in our business, a lot of people say I go to my favorite critic. Or I go to whatever. And I have no interest in that.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. But wait, okay. So can we start pulling some threads and comments? And just to start, okay, so it's Germania. I love what you're saying about it, but I don't know enough to respond to it. But the sagas, what I hear you saying, are you thinking about like Njal saga? Would that be a good example? Because that's
Eagle saga, or the I like the I just re-listened to the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, and Folsom, all that Voluspa, all that stuff. Including the Grimm stuff, an axe time, a sword time, we should read her for 3 years and all that, right?
Well, what I was going to say about that, what I remember about the Icelandic ones is that there's this unbelievable sense of humor in the grimness. So somebody will say to somebody else, like, well, how is my brother doing? And the other person will say, well, not that well, considering I left an axe in the back of his head the last time I saw him.
and then drop a few lines of satiric verse. Because one of the best ways to score points is to have some verses ready to roll. I like that. I like how legalistic they are. That
very
after you split the guy's skull, then you immediately declare, I have split this guy's skull, and here's how I built a loophole to get out of paying the full price that I have to, and all that. I like all that stuff, and I just love the way that it always begins with like there was a woman named this, or there was a man named that. This is who their parents were, and this is where they lived, and this is the farm they were on, and this is how many like animals were on the farm, and just kind of everybody gets laid out, and then they go from there. And so, as much as they're fantastic tales, they're also just sort of hard-boiled social realism,
right?
About a very hard-boiled time.
About a very hard-boiled time. I mean, because I was gonna. That's the thing I was gonna ask is whether, because I want to get back to Woodhouse, because I'm actually reading Brideshead Revisited right now, which is. Right. So Waugh is kind of sits next to Woodhouse, not exactly the same, but that's not a very grim time. That's like a rather jolly time. And I wonder about the connection between like books that can be very jolly about, the gay jazz age are one kind of comfort. And then books that can be funny about utter misery, the way that Icelandic sagas are. Like that's a different kind of achievement.
Absolutely. I'd say when I'm up for facing things, Icelandic sagas, when I just need to, decompress, when I just need, essentially to like, read a Calvin and Hobbes collection, whatever it is, right? Then that's the role of Woodhouse, really.
Yeah. So speaking of the way that the sagas work and that kind of matter of fact laying out the world, I have to ask you about this book, Iceland's Bell. Do you know it, by Halldór Laxness? No,
I do not.
He also wrote that one called, I think it's called Ordinary People or something. Does that ring a bell? He's like, he won the Nobel Prize, but he's, I don't know. I love it. It's an attempt to do a modern, I'm trying to look up the name of his other big novel because I bet you will have heard of it. The other one is just about a sheep farm in the 1920s. I think it's called.
I think it's fair to say that I am at least 1,000 years out of date on my Icelandic literature.
All right. Well, so we're going to forget about the other, which I don't even like, but Iceland's Bell. it's like set in maybe 13th century Iceland when it's just completely ruled by Denmark, and there's no, it's a totally abject place, and it's like there's only one thing of value in the entire country, which is this bell that was in the cathedral, and it's the saga of the recovery of the bell. But I love it because it's a 20th century reimagining of the saga.
Well, I'm a big fan of 20th century writers who try to appropriate some of that rhythm. But here's one that might come as a bit of a curveball, which is I find that I take I don't know what the word is. It's neither comfort nor joy, but it's related to both. I take some sort of satisfaction from reading about really terrible people, just fictional or not, just behaving awfully. I was listening to this these pair of investigative reporters wrote a book it's called Broken Faith, and it's about the Word of Faith ministry in North Carolina. And the woman who ran it, Jane Whaley, was just the worst person you could ever imagine. Just awful.
Yeah.
And there's something, I don't know what the word is, not joyful, not comforting, but there's something like, you're sort of like, Homo sapiens, they still got it. Like there's something about just reading about a truly awful, selfish person when you're trying to get along with your neighbors and not be a jerk and sort of count to 10 and, that it just,
so in a way,
there's something sort of emotionally liberating about that. But this woman, Jane Whaley, would do things like she would do things like when two parishioners got married, she would not let them have sex, and they would have to call and get permission, but they did have to go home and go to bed together. And then she'd be like, "But don't have sex, like you're not allowed to." And she would, and she just like got into people's business, at a level of I guess it's what the principle, the thing that is satisfying is unreasonableness.
Yeah,
because we're all having to be so reasonable. Like don't hoard groceries.
Right.
Don't be hurt with your neighbors and all that kind of thing. And it's like there's something that just like it's like taking a tremendous guitar solo, to just be awful.
Yeah. Have you read that Scientology book, Going Clear, which I love? Yeah. And some of the same weeks, I actually don't usually like reading about people suffering. And it was painful to me to read about those basements and like the ways that people got into these abject, credit, financial indebtedness to the church, which then could only be paid off by like being locked into a basement. But I mean, there's something about that notion of the quiet desperation that's going on all around you, or the loud desperation. And now we're in a moment where we are all genuinely desperate, like this is a desperate time for the entire world. So maybe there's something about being able to look at those moments when, oh, look, it's so cute. There were only like 30 people who were locked in a basement, not the entire fucking world being locked into that.
And also like you could make it better by just expunging the awful person. Yeah. Like there's sort of a target, and let me just point out that Jane Whaley is sort of like, picture someone who said, Scientology, the problem with Scientology is those people are too understanding, too reasonable, and too friendly.
Right. Oh my God, I have to read this book. Okay.
Their main technique was called blasting. And so what blasting is when they decide you are sinful in some way, which is anything, anything at all. They all stand 1 inch away from you and scream as loud as they can, drive the devils out of you for hours. But then they had this wrinkle. They were like, well, that's okay, but that's not really blasting. So they would just beat the hell out of you. They would just, punch you in the face and knock you down. It was just it's like insulting a mobster in a bar and they all stomp you. And it's not unrelated. I mentioned Charles Portis, the guy who wrote True Grit and Gringos. It's not unrelated to that he has great unreasonable characters. And I value unreasonableness in a literary character. I'm not much for like learning and growing and art and all that stuff and hugging it out, but I really like just selfish unreasonableness in the character.
Do you like that in Cormac McCarthy, where it kind of gets taken to an extreme? I mean, there's a kind of mannered Baroque unreasonableness.
So mannered Baroque unreasonableness, I like. Complete, utter surgical lack of a sense of humor is less satisfying. I mean, I think a writer needs a little bit of a sense of humor.
And he's got nothing.
No, well, I mean, at the Blood Meridian might have a little bit
It's hard to tell.
Yeah. So, like, I have no craving to read Cormac McCarthy. So Thomas Berger
I've never read him. Okay. Yeah.
Specializes in completely selfish, unreasonable characters.
Yeah.
Which is what Neighbors is. Neighbors is a story of like the neighbors just sort of move in on these people's life, and it got made into a fairly strange movie by Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. So there are other writers who have that quality. And then the one who really has that quality, this fantasy and science fiction writer named Jack Vance, who I've written about and I'm a big fan of. He's fantastically good at hostile encounters between strangers where there's no obvious reason for the hostility. You come into you're staying in an inn. It's, some fantasy novel. He doesn't care about the fantasy at all. He's not interested. He just likes to have his characters travel around and run into jerks, right? So you come into the hotel, let's say, and there's a scene like this. A guy comes into an office and the clerk ignores him, and then the next guy comes into the office and the clerk immediately serves the other guy. Yeah. And the first guy says, like, how come you didn't, why didn't you serve me first? I was here first. And the clerk is like, well, that scheme has a certain naive simplicity. And it's very, just absolutely unmotivated nastiness for no reason. I do like that. And in keeping with our theme, for whatever the reason, I want that more now. I am so much more interested in world thinking than I am in plot. I am in ideology.
Me too.
Theme. Yeah. And that's why P.G. Wodehouse, that's why the Bertie Wooster series, which I think I seem to have started at the beginning and I'm just going to do the whole thing.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Which takes you like the whole middle chunk of the 20th century, right? Even though it always feels like it's 1926, it's not, right? It's a pretty simple world. It doesn't have a lot of moving parts.
Right.
And it's a world created entirely by the narrating voice. That's the whole thing, right?
I'm looking at publication dates as you say that, because now I'm interested in whether, so it's like Brideshead, because a lot of them are 1940s books written, like Joy in the Morning is 1947.
But the first one is like 1919, right?
Yeah, right. But
I like to remind myself,
it's like the Hardy Boys. They're always 17 years old.
But I like to remind myself that first one, he was writing during the flu pandemic.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, this thing I'm going to for shelter from our current one, he was writing while people were dropping all around him,
For shelter,
And so, but that, it's sort of the same pleasure a little bit as a comic strip that you follow. I'm a big reader of the newspaper comics. I've always loved the newspaper comic. Yeah. And it's a little bit that same thing. It's like, what are the moving parts that, like if you read The Wizard of Id, there's like the balcony where the king gives his speeches. Yeah. There's the dungeon. Yeah. There's where the wizard's workshop. There's not that many places, right? Yeah. And the Bertie Wooster's world, there's his flat wherever it is. There's a couple country houses that he goes to. There's a couple music halls, and that's it. And there's something about the economy of a world like that. And just coming off of your point about reading slower, I think there's something about the economy of a world like that it so well that you want to linger. Yeah. And I think that's another reason why reading fantasy and science fiction, or going back and reading the original Robert E. Howard Conan short stories. I know that world, and I've known that world since I was 12.
Right.
And Robert E. Howard's Conan stories do not lack for regrettable features in the way he thinks about other human beings. Yeah. But they swing. The language swings, and I know that world, and I know how it works. And just knowing how it works, it's like, it's like a city you travel to frequently. It's like, I love walking down that street and the way it opens into that square.
So that was actually, I had kind of a pivot to a last set of questions, which are about childhood reading, but maybe we could just jump right in with kind of the big question, which is like, when you go back to childhood reading, is it with a sense that you're going to get back that childhood completeness of the world? Or is it, that would be like the naive reading? Or is it more like what the sentimental reading, where you're aware of the gap? Like, I liked it in one way as a kid, but now that I come back as an adult, I like it in a totally different way.
Well, first of all, I'd like to point out, we have been talking about my childhood.
That's true.
Okay, when the 1970s really got down on me, when I made too many chemical mistakes, P.G. Wodehouse was there to... Mm-hmm. So I would say I don't think so much the sentimental one is, I think it's sort of like the feng shui of those worlds. It's the familiarity of the world thinking, the voice, that it's sort of like Jack Vance has a character who travels with a portable hole with him, so that when he's being pursued, he just climbs in the portable hole. And it's a little bit like that. It's like, of course, now what happens to that guy is instructive, which is he's being pursued by a guy named Chun the Unavoidable. And Chun the Unavoidable never actually does anything except to be unavoidable. And so the guy gets in his portable hole, and once he's in his portable hole in like no space, this voice at his elbow says, "I am Chun the Unavoidable." So it's a comfort, but it's not an absolute comfort. Right? I really do think it's that the universe is bigger. There's more adjunct pieces of it than the one we're in right now, and that these pieces are to be lingered in.
So I see. So in other words, the universe is bigger. The universe of any one world of any one book doesn't have to be bigger. It's just like you need to know that they're out there.
You need to know that there's other rooms, you know, and to come back to where we started, I think that's also true by going back and reading much older things, going back and reading Tacitus and reading the sagas, is to say that the world that we're living in is more sort of spatially expansive because there's all this other world thinking, and then it's also more expansive in time than we usually keep in the forefront of our mind. And to say, like, you know, I guess it's a way to make it bigger so that you aren't feeling trapped, and I think people are feeling a little trapped, you know.
Okay. Recall this book is hosted by John Plotz and usually Elizabeth Ferry, with music by Eric Chaslow and Barbara Cassidy. Sound editing is by Claire Ogden. Website design and social media by Kaliska Ross. We always want to hear from you with your comments, your criticism, and most of all right now with the reading that you're doing for comfort or for joy purposes. Finally, if you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to write a review or rate us on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. Check out our other Books in Dark Time conversations and also conversations with such writers from our previous episodes as Zadie Smith, Shishan Liu, and Samuel Delaney. So, Carla, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening.